Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. My name is Baji Illuminati. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer of Dragonboat. Very excited to welcome these two amazing speakers today who combined have incredible background across a variety of different functions within product, from operations to portfolio to strategy to Chief Product Officer, running everything at a variety of different companies of all sizes and all different industries. So a couple housekeeping items before we get started. This webinar is being recorded. We'll share the recording as well as the slides after the fact. Everybody's on mute, but feel free to submit questions through the chat feature at the bottom, and we'll answer them at the end. We have about 20 minutes saved for Q&A, so we intentionally wanted to save a lot of time for open discussion between the two speakers and amongst the audience. Hi, Jeffrey, joining from Kenya. Love it. All over the world. Good to see. I'm going to close out this poll. Oh, we've got somebody from Montreal as well. Hi, Diana. Where else are we logging in from today? Denise, you're in New York. Becky and I are in California. So we've got East and West Coast pretty well covered. Okay, Washington, DC, Switzerland. Wow. I love it. All right, I'm going to close out the poll so we can see where we're at with the group today. Okay, most people are leaning towards just learning more about product ops generally. So we'll definitely spend a big chunk of today covering that. And then through the Q&A, we'll really dive into a lot of the OKR side of it, connecting it with roadmaps and how to think about using product ops to become more outcome focused as a product organization. Wonderful. So I won't spend too much more time. I'll pass it over to the speakers to give an overview of what is product operations, how the industry has evolved to create the need for this function, where it fits within the organization, and then how to think about it for your specific role, your specific company, whether you're getting into product operations, working more closely with product operations, or driving that function forward within your company. So with that, I will pass it over to Becky to take it from here.
Thank you, Baji. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Denise, would you be able to pass the slide to next, please? Nice meeting you. And like Baji mentioned earlier, the product function has evolved a lot over the years. And I've been fortunate enough to have worked in many amazing companies, from smaller ones to growing to unicorns to Fortune 500, and definitely learned a lot of how building product has evolved. Next slide, please. What we noticed is that in the earlier days, the functions are very top-down, meaning the executives, the management had all the decision-making, the ideas, the teams were primarily focused on execution. So there were IT and the regular business, and there were business analysts who took basically the requirements and convert to something for IT to code, and their project managers, their job was to make sure everything's done, regardless what it is and what it's supposed to get. And over the years, we've seen that technology and things have been changing, where IT became engineering. Engineering became this focus on technical solution for product problems. And then we start to see business analysts turn into product management, and product management really focus on customer problems and building product solutions for customer problems. And the next trend is to see that project managers also start to become a more strategic and a more outcome driven. So we start to see project managers, and with the flavor of a product management and portfolio management, evolving to new roles. And that's really the going trend, because we have to the knowledge workers and decision making really has been decentralized to the team. So as we've seen that not just manage individual projects, we're looking at the product, not looking at individual product features and the roadmaps, we're looking at as the overall portfolio, so then we can deliver outcome. And the teams also evolved in different capabilities. So very excited to have Denise have this conversation. Next slide, please. We do know as things change, not just go from one role to the other. The whole scope of the role and the way we work on it and then we solve problems all have to change. That would include things more than just people, more than just process, more than just the tools, everything coming together. Because if we just have goals, we still could have misalignment and confusion on strategy, and execution could be all over the place. And with that said, I'm very delighted to have Denise talk more about how product ops helps to address these complex problems and solve sort of the emerging trends and challenges.
Excellent. Thank you.
Next slide.
Hey guys, I'm Denise. So happy to have everyone here today. I'm really excited to talk about product ops. We're going to do a little taste of product ops, and hopefully we'll get everyone's questions answered and curiosities. I come to product operations kind of in an organic way. I've got about 10 years experience as an operating product leader. And when I was at a company called Cision, a B2B SaaS company, is really where I was exposed to product operations. This was back in 2014, and I don't think it really was a thing yet. But my boss insisted on having a sort of insights and strategy team. And it really was the precursor to product ops. We had someone as a product analyst, munging through the data, pulling out actionable insights, going through, engagement metrics, understanding where we were losing people in the funnel, and speaking to customers. We also had a user research analyst as well. And from the sort of power of these three women that we had on the team, we identified some potential opportunity with an add-on product. We created a Wizard of Oz type of test, and the product earned $1 million in the first year. So after that, I was a real, convert and believer in product ops, and really started to see the power that it could bring to an organization if the organization is open to making a little bit of investment. So yeah, that was my big experience at Cision. I've also worked on B2C brands, and I also do education work in terms of program leader at NYU Tandon School of Engineering, the National University of Singapore's Business School Design Thinking class, and I also lead a product ops masterclass for Products Labs. So what is product operations? And at Products Labs, we really came to sort of a thought and a visual, right, of that Venn diagram of how everything comes together. And it's really that overlap of product and engineering, customer success. There's more inputs, but this is kind of the high level way to think about it. It's really pulling everything together, right, for the cross-functional visibility and the insights to make sure you're getting the product strategy inputs, all of those inputs and insights to make sure you're creating an informed strategy that will move the business forward, that will create customer value. And the way we like to think about it is really three pillars of product ops. So the first one is business and data insights, right? So that could be everything from engagement data to sales information in terms of revenue, churn, retention. So really thinking about collecting and analyzing that data for strategy creation and monitoring. The second aspect is customer market insight. So how are we taking advantage of our touch points with our customers? How are we facilitating and aggregating all of that research to make sure it's reusable, that we're not sort of hitting the same users every time for inputs? And then finally, processes and practices, right? So how do we scale that value and make sure we do that in a consistent way? So one big way is through processes, frameworks. So the three pillars. So really the responsibilities of a product ops person is really thinking about comms, right? Reinforcing processes, policies, and practices. An evangelist for user research, someone who's really working with the PMs to think about how to learn to fish. They're streamlining intelligence. They're bridging the key changes within an org, externally, internally within the product team. They own professional development for the product managers, right? How many of you guys have been at a company where you may have a stipend for professional development, but everybody has a different framework. So when everybody gets together to sort of speak about planning, road mapping, everyone has kind of a different language and a way of thinking. So this person really makes sure that there's a consistent way of training and sort of that language that you'll use. This person is also your go-to for sales and CS. So questions about go-to-market, something that was on the roadmap that they aren't necessarily seeing, if there's a delay, what's happening. So often product managers are just more and more overloaded, right? And we count on them for so many things: delivery, discovery, more and more commercial strategy, right? So adding all of these pieces in on top of that, and also being pinged by CS, sales. So this person is kind of the first line of defense to make sure that there's comms going back and forth. And finally, ProdOps really owns the quarterly business reviews, monthly roadmap reviews, other types of touch points within the product team and cross-functionally as well. And they're the decision maker around processes and what enables them and how they enable them. And the processes are I think, one of the key pieces, because it's around how much do you need, making sure there's just enough, not creating process for the sake of it, but really customizing it for that team and for the organization in general. So the way I think about it, there's really two key types of product ops roles. There's a product analyst, and that person's really focused on data, right? They're thinking about where are we getting the data? How are we actually tooling that to actually collect it? So the instrumentation of any sort of analytics suite, right? Or a mixed panel or an amplitude. How are we connecting the dots? That's really important. You can be really great at making sure you're getting the data, presenting it, but you really need someone to be able to put the dots together and highlight potential trends and potential insights that could be actionable. And they're really coming up with consistent reporting to inform your strategy, right? So this type of person really over-indexes on data, obviously, and they're really good at pulling out those insights. And being able to sort of munge data and pull out insights isn't necessarily one and the same. They don't necessarily go hand in hand. So finding that person is really important. The second type of person is really more around process, right? So they're thinking about tooling, all of the different processes. What does annual planning look like? How are we road mapping? How are we engaging with the different cross-functional teams to make sure we're getting their inputs? And they're coaching the PMs and aligning to that framework like I talked about earlier. And then they're really an evangelist for the best practices in the org, and hopefully staying abreast, joining moments like this, other areas in the industry, having a community of other products leaders that they share information with. And this person, I think the really key piece here is they have a high EQ, right? They're really able to understand the subtext behind challenges, concerns, questions, and understanding that and being able to address it. And passionate about consistency, someone who just really geeks out on, we've got a process for this, we have a template for this, and here's how it's going to enable, better strategy, better revenue, better customer value, and really is able to sort of see the full picture and put those together. I speak to companies sometimes and they want to hire one person and they want to hire amalgam of all of this. And my point of view is it's kind of a purple squirrel. You're probably not going to find someone like that. If you do, amazing, hire them. But typically you're going to have, these types of roles. And I think which one you take first and which one you hire first totally depends on your organization where you have better needs. Typically, I've seen companies really having problems with data. And I say, yes, hire that analyst first. But some companies I've worked with are like, oh, we've got the data thing down pat. Processes and practices and templates, we're hurting. Go for that. But typically, you would make one hire and then another. So when I was chatting with Becky and Baji about this, they had a really interesting idea about thinking about a day in the life of a product manager before and after products. So let's try to go through this, right? So before product operations, you're a product manager, a product leader, you're creating the product strategy. And how many of us have done this? We base this on sales ideas or inputs from a few customers, right? And here we go, here's our strategy, this is what we're doing. But after product operations, you have all of those key insights that come to you with enablement through automation, with data and insights, and that not having to sort of scramble to find that around strategy planning really helps enable you to focus on customer value and business outcomes, right? So you're not like, oh, I need to get this, so I need a manual pull of that, and then it's more about the means than the end. So product operations, you've got all that flowing, and it's set for you to actually think strategically, right? Thinking about how we talk to customers, right? So some companies I work with, like, oh yeah, we do user testing. We share the release, a week before we send it out. And whether or not they got good or bad feedback, that release increment's going out. And hopefully after product operations, you've got really good practices and processes in place. You're building and discovering and prototyping as BAU, business as usual. They're creating templates around that as well. OKRs is a really big topic, and you guys definitely said that in the poll earlier, but a lot of times we'll see, OKRs are a list of to-dos that are forgotten on a Google sheet, right? They create them, it comes from the top down, maybe, if you're lucky. Otherwise, it may be, the PM's doing it from the bottom up. They put them in a Google sheet, their manager looks at it, great, they don't go back to it. Product ops lead will work with the PMs to set the OKRs and then make sure they're reviewing them on a consistent basis, right? And this is not a full list of sort of pre and post product ops, but this is just sort of a set here that I think are the most important. Something that happens a lot, product managers on the team have their own format for road mapping and sort of process as well. Typically they're expressed as features. I know outputs are sort of frowned upon now. We want to focus on outcomes, but still people are really creating those roadmaps around features. So the power of product ops is you've got one person looking at it holistically, and you could have teams of like 90 product managers. It's hard to sort of keep things consistent there, but if you've got someone in products thinking about all of that, how we want to focus towards outcomes, you can do that. And for example, your products manager could create that roadmap template really focused on outcomes and customer value versus feature. And the cross-functional teams will be so excited. They'll bask in the consistency. Everyone will know how the process works. They don't have to sort of context switch when they work with different teams. So it can be a beautiful thing. So just a couple of tips for implementing product ops at your company. Obviously, any sort of new function or practice is going to be really dependent on buy-in, right? Not just from your manager, that's the first piece of it, but really the cross-functional teams too. And a lot of times in the classes I teach, like, well, how does that differ from marketing ops and sales ops and DevOps? And it really is, they're all of the ops, but they can work together. And it's about making sure everybody is really intentional and purposeful about who's doing what. And it doesn't mean that if there are sales data that the team needs, that the product ops manager has to sort of redo that. They can share that with sales ops, and they can share engagement numbers with the sales op manager. So hopefully it's really sort of a collaborative process. As I mentioned earlier, in terms of who you want to hire and how you want to hire, each company has its own unique needs. So it's going to look different at every org based on the demands and complexity. I've rarely seen a whole team hired. It's typically, that hottest need, and they sort of build out from there. And you want to make sure before you quickly, like, we need that, I got to have one of those, analyze the challenges, really think about where are you lacking. In the masterclass that I teach, we have like a whole sort of checklist of like, are you getting this? How are you getting that? How would you get this? And that really helps you think about, oh, I didn't even think about that. Maybe we would be needing more in the user and customer research side. And you want to create the consensus with the team too about where you recommend starting. And just get started, right? So decide that area that you want to handle and then start creating the job description. And the best recommendation I can make for a job description is look at other orgs' job descriptions and really think about what's important to you. And it shouldn't be a cookie cutter. What processes and templates look like at your company may be very, very different from the next company. So take your time with it, but try to start building it. And that's the biggest piece. And keep talking about it, mentioning the benefits, talking about the benefits. And, sometimes it's hard because, as I mentioned, Cision, 7 years ago, creating that team was a challenge because they weren't revenue generating. It was kind of a revenue suck, right? Or the cost suck. And so you really have to be able to, tie their outcomes and the deliverables that they create towards better customer value, better business outcomes, more revenue. So you need to be able to do that, and hopefully in a way that would be projected. It could be in terms of turnaround time to create strategy. It could be in terms of you're seeing revenue numbers dropping and can point to areas where, any sort of insights were not used, which is probably a lot of the time, you can start building that case. But it really does depend team to team. I've given you a lot here. Like I said, I do a 4-hour class. We've done this in about 15 minutes. I'm teaching a Product Ops 101, just getting started with product ops. I have a class on the 23rd that's sold out, but I have a sign up that's open for the wait list. So if anyone's interested in learning more, you can go to Products Labs. It's a 4-hour class, not for the faint of heart, but it's really great. We do a lot of hands-on exercises, working together, breakouts. So folks really have enjoyed it. And I hope to see some of you guys there.
Thank you so much, Denise. Okay, so now that you've all had a bit of a taste of product operations and the value that the role can bring to your organization, we have just the tool for you. So Dragonboat enables product operations and those that might not have a full-time product ops person to effectively run an outcome-focused organization. We try to make the process as easy as possible. We'll help you map over your existing spreadsheets, and you can get set up and started within a couple of minutes for free. So give it a shot. I'll send more information in the follow-up email, and we'd love to see you start applying some of these product ops best practices to your specific company and automating and streamlining the process with Dragonboat. Okay, with that, let's hand it over to Q&A and take some of these audience questions. How have you seen product ops teams structured and sized?
I assume that's for me.
Yeah, you want to take that, Denise?
Yeah, it's really depends on the scale at which you want to set out to create the practice. So if you think about the startup phase, you may not even have a product manager at that point, right? Sometimes that's the co-founder and they're sort of spinning the plates and doing the product work as well. Analytics, starting to select tools, and probably not putting a lot of processes and governance in place yet. So don't see it as much there. Doesn't mean it couldn't start there, but like I said, if there's not even a product function starting there, it's hard to bring that discipline of product ops in. Where I see it happening more is at the scale up phase, right? You might have one analyst, a database and tool owner, and one product ops director. And we'll definitely start, as I mentioned, more focused on the highest need that you have and then putting that into place. And at scale company really starts to ramp up, right? So it could look like one analyst per director or group lead, 2 database or tool owners, and 1 product ops director per 6 to 10 teams. So again, I wish I could tell you it's like, it's A, it's B, it's C, it depends. Yeah. But that's how we've seen it scale up. And some teams have really been able to do that effectively.
Right. I totally hear you, Denise. I think it's funny you mentioned product ops. Actually, we had that role back in PayPal.
Oh, wow.
2012, maybe 2011, 2012. Actually, the head of the product ops, it's called operations for product, which is product ops. Mm-hmm. She now is the CEO of a billion-dollar company. So it's quite amazing. So the career journey. But at PayPal, we had obviously product teams, product leaders, and under product leaders, there are analysts under product ops, but they kind of dotted line to various product leaders. So you have an analyst and people can go to get data inside. So there's a pretty clear delineation, product manager like ratio to product ops, just because the organization is so big. At smaller companies also, one of my previous company, Fizai, when I started building their product organization, and when I joined in was kind of like a product ops / program management, both. And then we kind of expanded to have one product ops and then with some program management underneath, like a partners, one on the engineering side and the product ops, like one person working with about 20 product managers. So yeah, it's definitely, there's a unique needs on both. And it's definitely, as you scale bigger, you need more ratio for complex product managers needs.
But it sounds like at PayPal, you had folks sort of embedded, but they rolled up to a product ops leader. Is that right?
So product ops was a standalone, and then she had a couple of analysts under her, and then the roll up of the product, the CPO, head of the product, and but then the analysts are dotted line to individual product VPs, just so that they're more familiar with the product area. So you have sort of like solid line reporting. two product ops who would report
Right.
to the product, peer with the other product VPs, and then the analyst a dotted line to functional areas to be more familiar with their space.
And I love that. I love that formation. I've seen some where they're just sort of reporting into the PM, and I think you lose that sort of commonality of sharing best practices and challenges and learning from each other by not having that sort of solid line dotting or rolling back up there. I like that.
Right. In the bigger company, definitely the case. When you're smaller, it's harder to manage that. It's always, like you said, it's just as a company morphing, the needs change and it kind of moves a little bit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Another question as it relates to specific roles. So how does product ops work with program management if it's still existing in the org? It seems like product ops actually removes the need for program management potentially, except if program managers are also owning a budget or P&L or something. So I'm sure it differs company size.
Yeah, it really does. I guess it's how you sort of split that out too. I wouldn't see that as necessarily an evolution from program management to product ops. They feel like different disciplines. I haven't seen a lot of orgs like that. Typically, it might be a PMO in product ops, and they're sort of trying to figure that out. But I think with program, you're still really focused on evolving that product, and product ops is about enablement to evolve that. So that's how I would see it as a differentiation.
Right. It's interesting you mentioned that, because I personally have gone both program management and product ops. I would say something product ops more focus on the product team as a whole, and the program management quite often was it's more of a product team as a functional as a whole, versus the program tend to be taking kind of a broader, but as a part of the sliver. So sometimes the program team, for example, also program has a start and an end, right? So you would work as a compliance, some sort of marketing programs as well, not necessarily just a product. It could be, HR programs have different sort of cross of the cut, but there's similarity in many ways.
Definitely.
Skill sets, right? So sometimes you do play both roles. It's just two different hats. But it's not the same hat. Yeah,
it's complementary. And I think you mentioned earlier, Baji, the P&L. I would still see that with the program person.
Yeah. Okay. Now switching gears a little bit to the OKR side of it, we have a question around, we just implemented OKRs at my company. Should the product be responsible for ensuring we hit them? And how should we best connect them with the product teams?
Should the product, can you repeat that?
The question is, should the product be responsible in ensuring we hit them? But it might be, should the product team be responsible?
Product team versus product ops?
Yeah, I'm not sure if somebody wants to clarify that, or we can just kind of speak at a more high level.
Yeah, sure. So OKRs are obviously, like I mentioned, sort of a set it and forget it mechanism at a lot of companies. And I see product ops as really that challenge that they sort of champion and evangelize. We've set these, but here's how we're actually tracking them. And are we going to actually hit them? And do we need to pivot? And I think that product ops really helps bring that to life and connects it to the roadmap. So ideally, you'd sort of be setting your O's, your objectives, and then your KRs, and then hopefully the roadmap is enabling that from that perspective, so cascading down, but making sure that you're staying on top of it and that we're really intentional about making sure that we're focused on that and tracking to goal. I would see that that would really be the product ops person, maybe creating stoplight updates weekly or monthly, just to make sure folks are on track. And if there's anything, any challenge or any problem, sort of surfacing that and having a conversation sooner rather than the end of the quarter and saying, didn't hit any of my KRs.
Right.
Becky, what do you think?
Right. I totally hear you. I think that's true. It's interesting that a lot of companies that I've observed is that OKR quite often came out of product organization, because the product is such an enabler to deliver business outcomes these days, right? Yeah. So what happened was it's almost like a beginning and an end and connection, meaning that OKR became one of the drivers to define our roadmap, prioritize our product, taking the customer feedbacks and data analytics, right, to feed in to product decisions. And again, as the things going on, then obviously we measure it, we have a cadences, and we have reporting, we understand, and as the things change, again, product ops and data analytics to say, hey, our conversion is dropping like crazy. We need to change how we're doing things, or if
Yeah.
our conversion is going through the roof, let's do something else, right? So that kind of lever really tying the data analytics to your product roadmap, so you continuously move across the board. Not just, think about it, if you look at just one individual thread, then you continuously focus on what you're doing. But when you think about product organization as a whole, as a portfolio, looking at the data, you actually change how you prioritize. So it's really going hand in hand in terms of, OKR as a goal and understanding the impact and understanding the result, then we change our roadmap. So totally
Right.
Very, very effective for having a product ops. That's really what I firsthand interacted with the head of product ops, Carrie Klaje at PayPal. That's what she was driving, is to say, how do we lead outcome-driven organization, taking the goals and then driving our prioritization and roadmap planning and resource allocation, and how we adjust it so that when we have our roadmap, it's always tied to business outcome. And that was really transformational. Like same experience that you are, right, Denise, that the outcome continuously influence how we work across the entire product org, not just one team, right?
Exactly. And you hit on something really good there, Becky, that in terms of resourcing, there's so much to product ops. That's a big piece of it too.
Right.
We have a roadmap that's a communication tool at the end of the day, right? But is it sort of a wish list? Has it been vetted with engineering? I see a lot of roadmaps that come out and they're, here we go. It's like, has engineering sees it at the same time as the rest of the organization. So that's probably a wish list. And really it's about understanding, what do we need to get there? And that's hopefully a conversation, a lot of discussion well before that roadmap is shared out, org-wide and externally, especially.
Right, exactly. And I really love what you mentioned that in how product ops connected dots, right? Because a roadmap as just a wish list or visualization is very problematic. One is working with engineering, because if something's too big, maybe you will change how you design the roadmap, right? If something has dependency, the other teams won't be able to deliver. You can't commit, because then you're causing the stakeholders a lot of problems down the road. And even with the other PMs, right? And I think before product ops or before this sort of the holistic thinking, we used to call something called a product by org chart, right? So you see the product, you see this team did it, this team did it, because they just have a different, right? And connecting them together to understand product dependency, technical dependency, and the timings, and that really just create a more holistic product and a better business outcome, and then we can actually deliver with the confidence. It's not the sort of like, oh, we deliver today. It's not. It's more of saying, can we even do it? Are we setting ourselves for success or failure, right? So that's like so critical, having a role and focus on that.
Well, and also you want to get ahead of it too. Your executive team and your board probably want to make sure that you have the resourcing to do it. But if you tell them 3 weeks before, it's probably not going to happen. So you need to have a better sense of that. And, to achieve this outcome, we need X, Y, Z in terms of resourcing. So it helps everybody just to get a little bit further ahead of it. Sorry, I could go on all day about that.
No, it's so true. I mean, that's something I also feel like very strongly, because a lot of times the product managers, I'm not saying all of them, right? Quite often they are focused so much on the vision, the customer feedback, and what I wanted to do. They, sometimes they forget and thinking, I gave it to engineering, it will happen, right? It's not always the case. And not being able to deliver to commitment is very problematic. I remember not long ago I was talking to a CRO, and he said, I left this company. It's a well-known company, obviously can't say the name. He said, I left the company because the product team cannot deliver. They promised, but they cannot deliver. It was buggy. We cannot give that. We cannot have business. We turn on the customer. He's like, they're all visionary. They have all these good ideas, but they can't deliver. It's interesting to think about product managers. You don't think about they deliver, right? It feels like something else, but there's a bigger part of it actually to realize the product itself. So yeah, it's awesome.
Exactly.
It seems like there's the product ops or program or the kind of modern product manager is the glue between the what and the how.
Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it. I like that.
So we have a question that just came in around getting into product ops. So when is the right time for the transition to product ops? What qualifications and experiences set you up for success in product ops?
I think, what Becky mentioned earlier is probably a really good sort of driver for that. So if you've missed some really important milestones. The delivery is challenged. It's a time to sort of peel back the onion, right? And think about, what are we asking all the product managers to do? And like I mentioned, there's just so many things we're asking them to do and deliver it, be brilliant, be strategic, be commercial, find all of the data, analyze the data, and then deliver it on time. That's a lot. So if that, it's sort of a negative moment, but you could say, you know what, I think they're being tasked with too much, and I think we need to enable them and set them up for success. Here are some areas I think that they're challenged, and by supporting that and budget, sort of scaffolding that, we can help set them on the path for better success and consistent delivery, rebuilding the trust, especially with the sales organization. So that could be a moment. It could also be, hey, manager, I just went to this great webinar and heard about this, and it seems like this could really benefit us. And if you can tie that back to the revenue, always tie that back to the revenue, not this could be cool or this would be great, but how is it benefiting the business and the customer especially? So the right time is really about you finding that moment and connecting the dots to say, aha, this is where this could sort of step in. It's not going to be everything, the 3 pillars. It might just be data initially. It could be just processes, but you find that moment and that opportunity and say, maybe it's annual planning. Maybe you sort of put your business case together and then start having conversations, talking about it, and then saying, I'd love to put this together for you. Could we talk about this? Maybe, maybe just a single head count, or maybe we could bring on someone fractional. So that would be my suggestion, and qualifications and experiences to set you up for success in products. I was just reading that question. There's no certification or anything. And I think it's really about, having the qualities that make a good products person, that empathy, that EQ, that, passion around data, or, really geeking out on processes. So it's really about, what work have you done? What experiences have you had, or what experiences have the people had that you're talking to? How can that sort of be correlated to what you need in terms of product ops? You may not find a one-to-one, but you have to think a little more broadly and understand, oh, you've been able to set up a whole product experimentation program. Tell me about that. And that sounds like process and sort of the insights, and like, okay, this could be a really great pillar, and how could they plug into some of the other areas we might need? Becky, what do you think?
Yeah, I think you're spot on. Well, number one, I say anyone interested into it should go to Denise's masterclass, so you get to know more, right? That's like a step number one. But it's not a simple role; it's complicated. Yeah. Because the problem we try to solve here is not simple. And sometimes I told people, saying process is a product, because it affects a lot of people, and it changes people, how they work together, what kind of outcome they drive, identify problems and solve it, right? So you need to understand how organization work, you understand how value created, you need to understand how the bottlenecks are affecting each other, and you also need to understand what people's willingness to adopt you, right? So there's all product management elements to it, and then obviously there's operational part of things, and outcome and data driven and all that good stuff. So and I think two things that Denise said is really right. You can't force that role until there's a need, and the need typically can be something bad happen, right? That's how we buy a product, because there's a problem, and that's really saying, hey, people cannot do this on their spare time anymore. We need someone focused on this, even just on the short term or fractional or whatever, like it's like, at least we can do this and move on to something else, because the problem is so bad. We get a bad product, we fail to deliver, our plan just all over the place, and we're not really aligning our goals with what we're trying to build. So the problem is definitely the main thing. And understanding, I do say the skill sets of understanding a general, product sense, the communication, Denise had a really good sort of a 2-slide to talking about the 2 types of the product ops. I definitely think both are critical elements of the success, and you kind of try to depend on how your company's needs are and focus on some of them.
And one other option too is bringing someone in fractionally, just to understand and sort of objectively learn and listen and make some suggestions and recommendations. Sometimes pulling back and really understanding the challenges and needs helps. That person can set those up for you and help identify who's going to own those going forward, take the training wheels off and go. So that's one option, rather than bringing someone in and sort of building that up from the bottoms up. So that could be more of a stopgap too.
Yeah, totally agree. It's like it's sometimes easier for outsider to come in because there's just so embedded a lot of organizational interest as well. So have at least someone come outside in as just provide a more neutral view, and then you can implement. It's not necessarily quote unquote internal. You don't have the skill set. Sometimes you just need an outsider's perspective and going through that. And also it's a lower risk way for your organization to adopt this role, meaning you don't have to hire someone and it turned out there's not enough work for that person. So the fractional approach is really great because you can get real talent with a real experience and at a fraction of the cost, and then maybe just get things started. So I definitely think that's a great way to go for those kind of specialty skills.
That's a good point.
And there's probably components of the products ops skills that would be good for product to learn, like focusing on outcomes, connecting and having bidirectional collaboration and communication with the engineering team, thinking about how to actually deliver and not just plan. So those practices I expect will become more present in the day-to-day of product managers as companies evolve as well. Oh, I like this question. What are some of the most challenging and rewarding parts of the product ops role?
Let's start with challenging. I think it's a little bit like herding cats, right? Especially initially. And the biggest challenge, I think, is just sort of understanding what the biggest challenges are and where to start and prioritizing that. You can't do it all at once, right? So I think figuring out what the biggest need is can be challenging. Getting buy-in can be challenging. Helping the other ops, battle of the ops, understand how we all complement each other. That can be challenging at times. I think what's really rewarding is, understanding, what the potential could be and helping realize that, and really feeling good about the consistency in processes and practices really working and bringing value. So that's I think the most rewarding part. What do you think, Becky?
I think you're right. I think sometimes the product ops is or generally ops it's a somewhat of a lonely work. It's very challenging because you're like one level away a little bit from the customers and revenues and everything, and therefore like it's also like a lot of product managers actually can relate to that, which is when everything goes wrong, it's our fault. When everything goes well, it's a team's job, right? So just being able to understand our purpose is to make sure the team's successful, make sure we're building the right product, make sure that we, our metrics going towards the right direction. Because ultimately, that's really what we're trying to do is help everyone to be more successful. So it's both challenging and rewarding at the same time. It's hard to manage. It's the same thing as a product manager, right? In many ways, but we are like even slightly like even wider and a little bit shallower in terms of the touch to the customer. But holistically, I think I definitely seeing in my career when you have great product ops skills, the organization work better. That the cross-functional teams are more aligned, less fighting, less finger pointing, customers have better product you deliver, and you are nimble, being able to change it quickly, because if you're a siloed organization, you can change very quickly. But if you have a more transparent, connected organization through the product ops framework, consistency, then you can see what's going on, be able to change and really drive revenue, drive business forward. So that's the rewarding part of it. You do see metrics get better. You do see your stakeholders just raving it. And you do see that people don't get so frazzled, right? People have confidence because the process and framework will make them aware of what's going on, right? Before that, just you don't know what's happening there. You don't know what could happen. You just like a lot of worries. And now with the product ops and the framework, people feel like, hey, I can sleep at night. I know there's a framework, know what's going on. I'm just in the know and I can trust, right? I think that's the outcome.
That's a good point. That actually reminds me of something else that I've seen a lot of sort of transformation in really setting up R&D allocation tracking. And a lot of times companies are like, we don't need to do that. We don't want our engineers just like marking hours. It's not about that. It's about looking at sort of where the resources have been used. So let's say you've placed a really big product bet on a certain outcome. You go back and look at the allocation, like, oh, interesting. Most of our engineers are working on X. And that helps you understand like, oh, all right, what's happening here, that this is the intention, but we're actually getting to this. So that helps, like you said, sort of like help you sleep at night to know that the teams are working on the right things. So.
Right. And you're totally right that, think about the allocation, tie outcome and the product together. And by the way, put a plug into Dragonboat. That's exactly what we built for, right? So when you start to think about your outcomes, think about your product features, and the allocation, target, and the real actually all tie into one place. And that is so important. Most people don't realize that resourcing is a very important part of enablement. So if you don't tie these two together, that's a big problem. That's where we have problem, right? There are things you want. The reality is different.
Right. Exactly. And it helps not only just sort of identify, intention and the reality, but also if you have been, working on something that is generating a lot of revenue, and you look and you're like, oh, we've only given it 10% of our resourcing. What would happen if we gave it 15? So it can be just a matter of sort of moving your bets around on the table.
Right.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay, that was it from the questions. Anybody else have anything in the audience they want to submit? Okay. Any parting thoughts, Denise and Becky, that you want to leave the group with?
Oh gosh, I'm just so pleased that so many folks joined, and that they're hopefully thinking about implementing product ops or what it could mean for them as a career. Make sure that you're staying on top of it. There are some Slack groups. There are, a lot of things on LinkedIn. Keep up with all of that, and, start joining the conversation and see where it takes you, and starting to understand, organizations like your own, what are they doing and how can you learn from that? And I think just being really open and sharing information can only help product operations get even bigger and stronger.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Denise. It's such a great insight. I just want to add on to that a little bit, is that sometimes the people don't recognize the job title product ops, feel like not as glamorous, but it's actually like the Carrie Clark was the first product ops leader at PayPal. She was basically called out as the CEO of the product organization. We run everything about product, not just the operations and planning and everything. It's a budget, and it's an amazing role that is a huge exposure to working with the senior leaders of the company, be part of the strategic decision, and then and personally also amazing growth to executive roles and become CEO of a company one day. So very, very cool position. And I'm very excited to see this role became more, recognized. And I definitely think there's a lot of opportunity here. So, and I think, again, I want to just highlight that Denise has a great class. I think people can learn a lot from it. So I hope one of you will be there. And I look forward to join that class as well, to see what's the latest.
Thanks.
Wonderful. So I will follow up with everybody with the recording, with the slides, with more information on Denise's class and more information on Dragonboat. And like Denise said, join communities, join the conversation, help push this forward and bring this to this framework, this way of thinking, and this way of building products based on outcomes to the forefront. So we're all in this together. Thank you both so much, guys, for a really engaging session.
Take care.
Thanks. Cheers.